Hello, hello. Buenas noches. How is everybody doing? We're back. We're on our regular Wednesday night live schedule. Thank you to everybody who is joining us live. Thank you to the folks who are watching the replay. I am excited about the conversation we're having tonight. We are going to be talking about, living that Golden Girls life, rethinking how co-living, co-housing. I don't know if y'all are familiar with those terms, but hopefully by the end of tonight's conversation, you'll have a better grasp of them and maybe some insight into whether or not this is an option for you. Um, when people talk about having a roommate, um, at least in the US, I know we think about that as something young people do. They do it out of necessity. They do it because they're poor and they don't have money. But we don't often think about it as an option for folks who are older. And I want to dig into why it is we think about it in those terms. Um, but before we do that, I do need to introduce myself. Before I even do that, before I introduce myself, well, let me introduce myself first, then we'll take care of the housekeeping. Um, If you are new here, if YouTube somehow the algorithm brought my video to your feed, welcome. My name is Adelia Borchade. I am a financial educator. I am co-founder and co-host of Reclaim the Retreat. I am on a mission to help Black women gain the confidence to live their life on their terms, be that financially or otherwise. I know a little bit about creating a new life back in 2014, almost 10 years ago. I made some really big changes to my life. And now here I am living and thriving in Mexico City. And so that's some of the stuff we talk about on this channel. I talk about the life that I live, um, the work that I do, empowering women to take control of their finances and their futures. I talk about travel or one day when I'm not going to be traveling so much. If that sounds like your kind of party, you are in the right place. You should absolutely subscribe to this channel so that YouTube will keep sending my content to your feed. Now, before I bring on my guest, I did want to do a little housekeeping. I really should have brought an image in here, and I didn't think that far ahead. Okay, I mentioned that I am co-founder and co-host of Reclaim the retreat for women and femmes who want to regain their peace, their happiness in their lives. We are going to be hosting a live info session this Friday, March 1st at 2 p.m. Eastern. So if you've been to the website, which is, what is the website? Okay. It looks like I'm back. Sorry about that, y'all. I don't know what happened. Um, can you let me know in the comments? You can. Hello? Angela, shake your head if you can hear me. No? Can anybody hear me? Okay. All right. I don't know what happened, y'all. I have no idea what happened. As far as I could tell, the computer still had internet, but I don't know. Okay, so thank you for saying. I appreciate that. So as I was saying, I was making an announcement about our info session on Friday. So let's say you've been to the website reclaimtheretreat.com, you got information about the various retreats, but you have some questions you want answered. You're not really sure if you're a good fit for the retreat. You want to know more about what goes on. You should join us on Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern. It is going to be live on Zoom. If you need the link for the Zoom, send me an email at hello@reclaimtheretreat.com and we'll get you all set up for that. Give me one more second, y'all. Okay, so now that we've done the housekeeping, now that we've had the technical difficulties, let's get back to it. And so, talking about co-living and co-housing, I am joined today by my guest, Angela Kanu. She's going to introduce herself to the Picky Girl Nation. But some of
Oh,
y'all probably recognize her because you've seen her around the internet, I'm sure.
just a little bit. Hi, everyone. My name's Angela Kanu, and wow, so I am a slow traveler, and I've recently landed in Mexico City. I'm actually an emotional well-being coach after being a social worker for 30 years. And really, I focus on working with women in particular around the emotional journey of taking a sabbatical or moving abroad. And I also do some coaching around trauma work and life story work. But today, obviously, we're going to be talking about co-living because it's something that Adelia knows that it's something that I have, explored whilst living in Mexico City. Yeah, so that's me.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us today. Um, so, I met Angela. I don't know how long ago it was. Here
Oh,
in Mexico City, I think you were just coming off of spending time in Merida, Mexico.
yes, yes,
And I think at the time you were deciding that you wanted to be here on a more permanent, permanent-ish kind of basis. Now,
yeah.
was the plan because you currently live in a okay, well let's work on some terminology. Do you consider with the living situation you have now, do you consider that to be co-living, co-housing? How do you
It's
refer to it?
It's co-living by my definition. I think co-housing is something a little bit more permanent, I think. And I know in places like France, like there's this whole wave of older French women who are kind of putting their money together to actually live together in a property that's legally separated. And that's much more permanent. And I think what I'm doing is co-living. So it's for a more shorter period of time. This is not for my natural life. It's not for my whole
Okay.
life. But this is a situation that in this moment in time is something that works for me and the people that I live with.
Now, now, when you first decided that you wanted to be in Mexico City for a longer period of time, were you seeking a co-living situation?
I wasn't opposed to it. I look in preparing for coming to Mexico, I did like lots of people do. I did a real deep dive. What was it that I wanted? What was it that I knew about myself that was going to make my life just that much more fulfilling and that just a little bit more like I'm creating that. And part of my preparation was about what does community look like for me? So it's not just about building community, but it's about what I wanted from community. And one of those was about being able to explore co-living and whether it was even possible at my age to do it. You know, we've look, we've all owned homes, we've all lived by ourselves for probably for decades, some of us. And so the idea of like living in a space with other people where like they're going to be doing different things to you. They're going to be thinking about cleaning, all that stuff very differently. And in some aspects, it's like a risk. So I knew that when I was preparing, I knew that it was a risk. But there were certain elements that were really important that I needed to see before I would, before I would jump in. Yeah. So it
And
was on the
Angela,
table.
okay, Angela is my guest tonight, but I now too live in a co-living situation. So I'm going to add my little 2 cents here and there. And it's funny that you said that about like we all owned a house or we've lived alone for decades. And that is not my case. I got married when I was 19. Up
Mm,
until 2015, I'd never lived alone.
wow.
So for me,
Wow.
it was, I don't ever want to live with another human being ever again. And that was my plan. But you make plans and then the universe laughs at you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so yeah, okay. All right. Now, how did you end up? Because you said it was on the table as a
Mm,
possibility
yeah.
being here in Mexico City. How did your current living situation, how did that come about?
Well, I was living in Merida before I came to Mexico City, and I was part of a walking group. And you every week you meet new people, and after a while, I realized that that Merida was like it had done its job, and it was now time to move on. And so I had mentioned to one of the women in the walking group that I was going to Mexico City, and she said, "Oh, that's really strange because I'm going to Mexico City too." And another woman from the walking group, I think a week or two later, I mentioned it again, and she said, "Oh, I'm going to Mexico City too." And we realized that our timings were like crossing over. And so one of the ladies invited me out for lunch, and she said, I brought you to lunch because I want to propose something. And she said, do you think we could maybe live together in Mexico City? Mexico City, 22 million people. That number alone is scary. So the whole idea that you could be in a city and know at least one person like felt comforting. And so I was like, okay, so how, then we got down to the nuts and bolts of, okay, so what would that look like? I think we were both very much like, we're proposing this, but it's a risk. This is a big risk. And then the other lady in the walking group, she was like, I said to her, well, she asked me, would I like to live with her in Mexico City? And I said, well, it's interesting you say that because another friend of mine from the walking group. So why don't we see if it's something that could work? And so this was over maybe about a month, maybe longer. There was lots of discussions backwards and forwards because I was the connector. I knew the two of them, but they didn't know each other very well. So it was a massive risk. So we had a lot of conversations about like, you know, what is your temperament really? Not the person that's outside in the streets. Like, who are you when you're home? What's your temperament? And we began to talk about being introverts and extroverts and what that meant. We talked about emotional health. We talked about cleaning, cleanliness, who comes to the house, who doesn't come to the house. And we started to develop rules. Um, yeah, and that's kind of how it started. And then we were like, what are the non-negotiables? What are the deal breakers? And so we um we then looked at like we all needed our own room. We all needed like a suite that we could retreat to. We needed things like um, you know, a toilet for guests and all of that kind of stuff. And so those were the things that we started to talk about. And and then we talked about, what neighborhoods we wanted to live in. But, you know, it was I suppose it was like an organic conversation. And I think that at any minute, any one of us could have dropped out. That's how we were kind of looking at it, that if it didn't work, that we weren't actually going to proceed. And so then we decided, after looking at neighborhoods and thinking, is this a real fit? Is And so there were certain things that um, were kind of we were kind of looking at. And one of those things was about, like, was this were we doing this because we needed it, or were we doing this because we wanted to do it? Was Did anyone have an underlying financial need, or like not wanting to be alone, or all of those things? Because I think those things you can hide behind a little bit. And so also understanding, like, what were our expectations of each other? Um, you know, None of us are mind readers. So we started from the point of, none of us can read anybody's minds. And so we needed to know what our expectations were, like in every facet. And so we were actually quite thorough about, what are the house rules? Like, we looked at things like visitors, family members coming to stay. What are people's thoughts? And obviously, all three of us are slow travelers. So there are periods of time when we are actually away from the apartment. And so that meant that we needed to think about, and I was very clear that in 2024 that I was going to be traveling, and they were going to be traveling too. And we didn't want to pay rent in two places. So we I was very clear that I would have to sublet at some point, because I'd be going away sometimes for longer periods. And so then we had to think about, you're then doing the mix again. Hey, Adelia.
Hello.
Hey.
Not sure what's happening with my internet. No idea, but thank you for holding it down.
That's fine. I know it happens sometimes. Like, technology is not technologician, or whatever the word is. So
And
I
so,
was yeah, go ahead.
no, I was going to ask. So you were filling them in on how y'all came together?
Yeah, so I started to go into a little bit of the practical things, because we wanted to look at what the deal breakers were. What were the things that were absolutely not okay? And we talked about our temperaments. So we talked about, there are some people that, like, don't have a lot of impulse control and might be a bit yelly, and, like, it's like that's and we were very clear that that wasn't the type of environment that we wanted. And that communication was, like, super important. But you can't just say the word communication, can you? What does that actually mean?
And I'm glad that you talked about y'all having that as part of your process, because what I
Yeah.
noticed was a couple weeks ago when I went live and talked about, my move and now having a roommate, a lot of the reaction was like, "What?" Like, I couldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. And I think what y'all give us an example of is that getting a roommate, like when you're 21, might be a different process than what that looks like
Yeah.
in your 40s, your 50s, your 60s. Like, you're a grown person. You
Mhm.
hopefully have learned a thing or two about communication and identifying what are the things that you need in your life, what are those deal breakers, what are the things that you absolutely can't deal with.
Yeah, definitely for sure. And like, ha- and actually, we were asking each other to be honest about what they were. This is not Instagram life. We don't have to be perfect. Like, what are like in your most, can I say the word shit?
Yes,
in your
yes, we
worst
curse on this channel.
in your shittiest day, what can it look like? And we talked about like some of our the way in which we coped with stress might be to retreat, or it might be that we retreat and come back. Or like for me, I was very clear that like communication is everything. And like it might not come out well, it might not be what you want to hear, but we're just going to be try and be honest in the calmest voice that we have, and actually because the other person can't read my mind, and I can't read their mind either. And so there are challenges to it. And I think that when we were having these conversations, we were like, look, if the deal breakers don't work, we're not doing this. If there are if there are bits that are in, like I said to my flatmates, look, I can't operate in mess. If you know you're someone, you come into the house and you're like a whirlwind and you just throw in things, no, this is not going to work because it messes with my ability to focus and my ability to think. And someone else said like cleanliness and like going into the depths of what she means by cleanliness, because not everyone's cleanliness is the same. Yeah. And what it means when someone retreats. What it means when someone retreats into their room, because our apartment is set up into little suites. So we've got huge communal areas, but we've also got our suites that we can retreat to. And so when someone says, "Oh, there are times when I need to retreat," and in that moment I can't talk to you about what it's about. I'll tell you about it later. But in the moment, I need you to know when my door's closed in this way, just, I'm fine. Just don't. mm, mm. And when I don't respond to you, please don't get upset. I'm trying to figure something out. So we kind of went a little bit deep because we were like, this is a risk. A
But I think
risk.
that's good because I think probably the 2 areas that are of most concern when someone is considering, um, this kind of, I hate to say lifestyle, but making this kind of change,
Mm,
is privacy and, social interaction. Because I have stated numerous times on this channel, y'all know I am an introverted introvert. Um, and that's part of the reason why this is titled The Golden Girls Reimagined Co-Living for Black Women, the Art of Being Alone Together, because that's
oh,
very much my roommate and I.
yes.
We
Yes.
live alone, but together. And so that y'all were having these conversations and you were going at that level of depth. I think that's important because I think it, and you can tell me, that would help make it a more successful venture because everybody laid things out on the table. You knew what you were getting in, you knew kind of what the expectations were. Because, like you said, you can't read
Yeah.
people's minds.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm. And we also talked about the level of wholeness where we were at. And by wholeness, I mean like how integrated we are with ourselves, and that was really important. Like, if you think that you're going to come into a co-living situation with lots of things emotionally undone, you actually energetically you can impact your housemates, your mood, your energy, where you are, impacts the whole energy of the house. And so, and I'm not saying that people have to be perfect or angels to do this. Has to be some level of quite sophisticated self-awareness, I think. And there has to be some things that you have worked on in yourself. Otherwise, you'll just unravel. You may just unravel in this situation. And so that's one of the things that one of my housemates today told me. Make sure you tell them your level of wholeness can dictate the success. And that's your own journey. That's your own responsibility. Yeah. Yeah. And
Now,
I think, oh, go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
And also, we looked at like us living together. Is this a need or is this a want? Because if it's a need and it's like, you can say anything when you need something, so you can say, oh, no, I'm perfectly fine every day, when actually, you might be rocking in the corner regularly. Do you know what I mean? Or you might be dealing with things that you may not want to share because your need is so great. And so I would say to anyone considering this, think, is this a need? Because you may have a financial need, which could drive you to do a lot of things. You could have a need for not wanting to be alone. But co-living doesn't solve that loneliness, because you can feel lonely with anybody in any situation. So
Absolutely.
we had to decide, was this a need, or was this something that we wanted to do? And that was really important, because if we were striving to have a need, maybe we wouldn't be as honest. Maybe we would say we're the cleanest people in the world, and really we're just like, oh, messy. Yeah, so I think there's something to think about with the other people that you're going to be co-living. Is there anyone who has a desperate need, and that's kind of clouding the decision?
Now, was this your first time doing co-living?
No, no, it's not. But like most people in my 20s, in my late teens and 20s, I lived. When I went to university, I lived with lots of other people, and that was a really positive experience. And that's when I realized that my household chore, laundry skills were insane for my age, because the other people I lived with were like, didn't know how to wash clothes and like keep things clean on a schedule. But anyway, that's another story. And when I went to the Netherlands, I went to the university there, and I lived in a house with other international students. And then when I went to Australia, I've lived with friends off and on, but probably in the last 10, 15 years, I've lived by myself, generally, with sometimes living with a friend.
Okay,
So
okay.
yeah.
So, I'm going back to my list of questions, things that I wanted to make sure I asked. Now, um, this all kind of evolved because you all separately were going to be here in Mexico City. Mexico City is notoriously difficult when it comes to finding an apartment, renting an apartment. It is a jungle, to say the
Yeah.
least. Can you share a little bit about what that process looked like for you all? Because I had done this by myself in Mexico City twice, and it can be a little different trying to find a place that is going to suit the needs of, because you have 2 flatmates, so
Yes.
that's 3 people. So can you
Yeah.
talk about that a little bit?
So I think we like Mexico City. It's a moving feast. It's like some people have really difficult times here securing accommodation, but I think we were really lucky in the sense that actually when we started looking, I was in Mexico City and my 2 flatmates were not in Mexico. One of them was in Merida and the other one was in the United States. And so I was the one who was going to look at all these properties. And so we just decided what it was that we needed as a bare minimum, like how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, and we just started looking. And by chance, we were able, like the universe was just smiling that day on us, and we were able to secure a property. The tenants were already still here, And we were able to look at, and we were able to look at the property, and we were able to secure it because one of the things in our favor was the owner liked the fact that we were older women. So like when I first came to see this particular property, there were some young people here, and the place was upside down. The place was like in some kind of terrible state. Yeah, it was in a very, very bad state, and the owner was really shocked. The real estate agent was really shocked, and they kept on, apologizing for the state of the place. And so the owner was like, "Look, we've got these three women of a certain age, they're going to keep this place clean. They are going to like take care of this place." So I think we were lucky in the sense that we probably looked at about maybe 4 or 5 places, and yeah, and I think we were incredibly lucky. It was in the right price range. It was in a better area than we had even wanted, and yeah, and we all had our own suites, so we can, retreat when we need to.
I
And
don't think most people get just how lucky y'all were, because
yeah,
what was on that list of things that y'all were like, "This is what we need in an apartment."
so it had to have minimum of 3 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. So this is Mexico City,
Right
right? So
there,
mo-
you've eliminated the vast majority of properties in this city, because I don't understand it, but they love a two-bedroom, two-bath.
they
Despite
do.
the fact that this is a culture that does multi-generational households, multi-generational living, I don't
Yeah,
know whose family fits neatly into a two-bedroom, two-bath. And sometimes it's a struggle to find that second bathroom. So y'all were looking for a three-bedroom, three-bath,
yeah.
um, so
So
that
three
everybody.
beds. Yeah, but we actually wanted 3 bed, 4 baths because we wanted a bathroom for guests. We didn't want anybody coming into our suites, visitors. And then we'd have to decide, okay, so whose toilet is the guest using today? So actually we wanted 3 beds, 4 baths. And actually we wanted that each bedroom had its own self-contained, like it felt like a suite, right? I don't know
Like,
what
you'd
we were
have your
thinking, but
own space.
you'd have your own space. Um, and so many of the properties that we looked at originally it was 3 bedrooms, but you always had that tiny bedroom that like just maybe could take like an individual or single bed,
That's because
or
that's the maid's quarters. They don't like to advertise them that way. They
mm,
might say, like, a studio, but when
yeah,
all the other rooms are roughly the same size, and then there's this teeny, teeny tiny room, that's what that
yeah,
is.
yeah. So actually, what we ended up with is 4 bedrooms, 4.5. No, 4 bedrooms, 4.5 baths with a balcony that runs the whole side of the
Oh,
apartment.
wow.
Because we wanted outdoor space, but it wasn't a deal breaker. And then we saw this and we were like, hang on a minute. We weren't looking for furnished. And this came furnished. So glad we did. So glad
Y'all
we
are
did.
I don't know that the people watching understand fully the luck, the favor
Yeah,
y'all were shown finding
absolutely.
a four-bedroom, 4.5 bath with a balcony, not just, like a little balcony off of one bedroom. Talking about that
Mm-mm.
runs the length of the apartment. Y'all, that's a needle in a haystack in this
I
city.
know.
It really, really is.
And one of the bedrooms has its own balcony. So
And it's
it
furnished.
like, and it was furnished and it had the washer dryer, it had the fridge, it had the microwave, it had the beds, it had the sofa, it had the dining table and chairs. And we were like, we weren't actually looking for furnished, but I'm so glad we did. And it's a jungle out here. One is because sometimes the prices can be quite a lot. And sometimes there was a period where I think we spoke about this, where some owners were saying that they were reluctant to rent to foreigners or people who were not Mexican. And I don't know if that's because a history of people maybe skipping out on the tenancy, or people not feeling like secure enough. So, but the owner that we met, the real estate agent and the owner were like, we want you to live here. We're like, this is Mexico City, right? And they're like, yep.
Yeah.
And I was like,
And
are we going to be gazumped? Is someone else going to come with more money and they're just going to say, oh, we you can't live here anymore, or we're not going to give it to you anymore? And I was like, why is this so easy? This is like the fourth place that we saw.
the universe tends to unfold as it should. I spoke about that when
Mm,
it came to finding this place because, again, we wanted 3 bedrooms because we each wanted our own space. We wanted an office, and we were aiming for 2 baths. We didn't think 3 threes were even a possibility, and we saw some rough 3 twos. We saw some things that were technically 2 bedroom, 2 baths, but there was this weird little extra space that maybe we could tweak and
mm,
make it work into an office. And then we find this place that's 3 bedrooms, 3 baths. So like you said, when there are guests, I have my own suite, she has her own suite. The guests don't have to use either one of our bathrooms. So, and I talked about how it was hard for me to, like, fully give into it because I was like, "Why is this working out? Why is
mm.
everything coming together?" So I know exactly what you're talking about. Now,
And
are
I,
y'all
and actually, Adelia, the other three properties that we saw were actually quite nice.
so this the way I look at it, this is how it's supposed to turn out. Now, are y'all, because we have a question about price. Are y'all comfortable sharing that?
Yeah, I think so.
So, how much are y'all paying in rent for this furnished 4 bedroom, 4.5 bath with a balcony or
33
2?
33,000 Mexican pesos.
Um, that's not bad. That's not bad at all.
No. No. No.
Okay. So how
Yeah.
long have y'all been living together?
So, it would be 3 months, 3 months or so.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right.
Just
And
just over 3 months, yeah.
and okay, so, it sounds like y'all did quite a bit of communicating and work on the
Mm.
front. Um, so have there been any surprises, unexpected things that, have come about in this 3 months that y'all have been living together?
I think in terms of positives, I feel super happy. I feel really happy. And it is only 3 months, but they're people that I've known for over a year. So, yeah, and it's made me realize like collective living is actually not really a terrible thing in our age bracket. Because one of the things that we also said that this is not just about us living together, this is about us supporting one another. And that doesn't mean that we're anybody's therapist, but what it does mean is that where we can, we support each other as women and as Black women as best as we can. What we can't do, we can't do. And I think I'm surprised at um, how happy I feel, actually. I can't quite put my finger on what exactly it is. I think it's a combination of lots of things. But one of the things that I think has been really surprising is about you have to be quite mindful about cleanliness. I think, like when you've got communal shared space, and I'm very mindful about making sure that, you know, um, there is that level of cleanliness and that people don't have to think about having conversations about, did you leave that pan out? Or Why is the, and those are the small things that I think could probably disrupt a household. Look, we've all lived with other people, or men, women, or whatever, where, your partner
Family.
or friend or whatever, family, that just don't get that the rubbish or the trash actually needs to go out. You can't stay there stinking all day. Do you know what I mean? Those types of things can unravel the household. It's like you come back and like the sink is filled with other people's, dishes, that type of thing. This is small things that I think can unravel a household. So trying to, in the very beginning, be really mindful around um, cleanliness, which is a surprise. I wouldn't have thought that that would be such a big issue, but I think it
Well, I like that you mentioned that it's also it's bigger than just I got somebody to split the rent with. It is
is.
about community. It is about
Yeah.
support. Um, in the work that I do, often I am coaching women who are looking to like move abroad. And one of their concerns, particularly folks, in our age range or older, both Angela and I are older than we look, um, is this idea of what happens as I age and I'm alone. Um,
Mm.
you know, I saw a thing on Instagram about like all of the things we struggle with are things we're trying to do alone that historically people have done in community. And
Mm.
I don't, obviously, y'all can hear that Angela is not from the United States. In the United States, there is this undercurrent, actually, an elevation of um, individualism.
Mm.
And so that's part of the culture, this idea that you're supposed to live by yourself. You are supposed to do all these things by yourself. And, that it runs contrary to so much of our history. And you and I were talking about this before we went live, that if you want to be considered successful, you're not going to be in your 50s renting, an apartment with two other women and unpartnered. Like that's not what's considered successful. And so I one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation tonight was because we need to start reframing some of that, because I don't know that it serves us in the ways that we want to live and in the lives that we want to create.
Mm. I think even if you just break down the idea of like women of a certain age and how much space you need, I think begin to get a bit creative about what that can look like when you're maybe sharing a space with other people. And it maybe doesn't have to be that you own all three floors. It might be that someone takes the top floor, you take the middle floor, and that someone takes the bottom floor. So I think we can begin. Look, we are giants. Like this moving abroad wave, this sabbatical thing, it's like everything is up for renegotiation. All you have to do is think about how could this be reconfigured, that I feel like I have my space, I feel like I'm in community, and I feel like you're doing something that is enriching you. That's the word that I would use. Doing this has enriched me. Um, and maybe I need to think about pulling that out about what exactly it is. I think it's a culmination of things. Yeah, so I think we have the liberty at this point to really reconfigure not just where we live, but how we live. And you might fit, there are
Absolutely.
some people that, either have maybe never lived on their own. And so living on your own is something that would be an achievement for you. And there are other people that are like, well, I wonder what it would be like if I could live in community, but still have my own space, feel like I've got a door that I can close where this is just my space. So you know what? We can start to get creative about like what that looks like. And I would just say, knock yourself out. We're doing the things of giants. So why not how we live?
There have been several comments in the chat about like what people's like ideal situation would be. I think it was Monica who mentioned it. Let me see. Um, Somebody was talking about, here it is. I think, um, cluster of apartments or tiny houses,
Mm,
shared common spaces, some required involvement in the community upkeep, dinners, that sort of thing. Monica's not
yeah,
interested in a roommate, like sharing the living space with someone, but wanting to live in community. And I think that's also important to understand that there's a variety, like you said, you can do this many different ways. And it's about
yeah.
finding the people and finding the community to do that. Because what you described, Monica, that exists. There is a lady on Instagram, her IG, her name is Elizabeth, Faking Normal. She also did
Mm,
a TED Talk. She built a new, it's called New Age Co-Living. I think it's in California, and it's aimed at women of a certain age. And it, again, it's almost exactly what you're talking about, Monica, where there's the community piece, but you don't necessarily have to share your living space. When I first moved to Mexico City back in 2017, and I was looking for something more permanent, one of the things that I noticed there was a lot of, I don't know that there still is, would be apartments that there was a common kitchen. So that's how the apartment
mm.
building was built. It's a much smaller than the typical Mexico City apartment building, but it was designed that way. Or there, I've seen several like old houses that have been converted where everybody kind of has their own suite, but then there are the common areas and you share a kitchen.
You know, it's interesting. When I was living in Australia, I was talking to one of my really closest friend about, I don't have children, and so we were talking about, well, what is it going to be like for us to grow up older, like for us without children, like what could that look like? And I came across this article about this wave in France, where in Paris, where and in Lyon as well, where women of a certain age were actually pulling their money together and actually buying these very old, huge mansions in Paris. And Parisian property law allows them to co-own. So someone's got the west wing, someone's got the north wing, someone's got the east wing, someone's got the south wing. So you've actually got your self-contained apartment within this block. But as friends or as people who know each other, you actually have co-ownership. And because of the way property laws are set up in for this particular type of, I can't remember what the name of it is called, this particular type of like owning a large property, it works for them. And there's this wave of French women who are doing this. And I said to my friend, look, let's do this. So, like, if we don't get married and don't become step parents to anybody's children, then let's go to Paris and let's buy this massive mansion, and yeah, you have the west wing and you have the east wing. And what happens amongst these people is they begin to talk about, as I get old, what happens to me? What type of care do I want? What, all of it, like all of it. And anecdotal research now coming out is saying that they think that some of this co-living is actually extending people's lives like more positively, because sometimes that if you think about retirement homes and retirement communities, and actually I don't know in America, but certainly in Europe and in Australia, they're kind of almost, some of them feel like scams where they're scamming old people, taking their money and doing all that type of stuff. And so I suppose we've got to be cautious about looking at this in terms of growing older, and that it just doesn't become a replacement retirement home. Do you know what I mean? That's the
Yeah,
thing that
no,
I'm like, hell no.
it's about figuring out what it is you want and then finding the other people who want to do the same thing. Um, like I said, when I mentioned that I now had a roommate, a lot of some people were like, "Oh my gosh!" And here's the thing: if you know me, you know I am not, as somebody who, as an adult, barely ever got to live alone and vowed never
Mm,
to live with another human being. If I'm making this choice, it is because there's some compatibility there, that like it works with the way that I want to live my life. Now, um, I will admit, I'm Gen X. I was raised by people who were like, the minute you turn 18, hell, when I moved out of my mother's house at 19, she stood there with her hands out asking for the keys. So, of course, like I'm raising my children with this idea of, I got to get you ready to be out there on your own when you're 18 and that sort of thing. And I talked to my oldest daughter and I said, I've rethought some things and I would be open to like multi-generational living. You don't have to live with strangers. Okay.
Mm.
Some of y'all have families that don't suck. Your co-living situation could be with those people. And I told her, I said, I'd be open to it, but of course, in a way that you and the kids had y'all space. I had my space. It's not going to work for us because I won't live in the United States and she won't live outside of it. So I was like, well, maybe you can coordinate with some of the moms, but it's really about finding the people who want to live in the way that you do, or in a way that uh, aligns with how you're going to be living.
Absolutely. And I think that like we could be really expansive in our thinking and we can be really dreamlike in like what it is that we're wanting to curate and create in our lives. I think this is a great time to really like think, okay, so for some people this is not going to work. For some people this is just not going to work. And like know thyself, right? Know thyself. But I think probably after COVID, I think a lot of people realize that actually sometimes it's the connections between us and the community that you can create, whatever that looks like, is important. Maybe more than money, and maybe more than. I'm not saying we don't need money, but like maybe more than some of those things. Our connections to each other and community are also equally important. And a lot of our Western communities don't aspire to those values because they want you grinding, they want you in that chair, they want you behind that desk, they want you clocking in at 8, 9, whatever, leaving at God knows when. And so, we it's an amazing time to be here and to be living like this, as far as I'm concerned.
Now, if y'all have got questions specifically about co-living or that sort of thing, please drop those in the chat. Um, are there things So while y'all are doing that, are there things that you or your flatmates think we should know about co-living? Things that they want to make sure that you shared with us because they declined being on camera.
Well, look, to their defense, they are introverts, and
Oh, I
they are
know.
self-confessed introverts, and I am a self-confessed extrovert. So they're like, Angela, you're the mouthpiece. You go, and I'm like, I will. I mean,
So
I mean,
if
they. mm,
if people are going to do this, what are some of the things they need to know?
I think. Look, don't be afraid to. If you get the feeling that this is not the group of people to do it with, don't do it. Don't do it. If you decide that your deal breakers, like they're deal breakers and they break the deal, just just let it go. Just let it go. And also, like we spoke about earlier, was about consider what state you're coming into this um, arrangement. Are you feeling needy, lonely, financially in need? Like really interrogate yourself, really have those conversations. And actually, if this is something that you think might work for you, begin to think about how you show up. When there's community, how do you show up? Like, are you the person who may be stirring the pot or overly kind or there is some, yeah, or a people pleaser. Just interrogate yourself because these things will come out and actually they will become sources of irritation or can be places of conflict, I think. And like really interrogate your level of communication. People can be really blasé. You know, we say it in our resumes all the time. We are excellent team players and brilliant communication. But actually, what does that mean? What does that mean? Does that mean that you, in your communication, that you don't want to upset people, so you're indirect? Are you very direct to the point where you lose empathy? Are you someone who, just shoves everything under the carpet and just ignores everything? Do you interrogate every single thing, and how, like, really interrogate how you show up when you've ever been in community, and maybe those are the places where you begin to work on those things, because your communication will honest communication can break the whole thing. Can break the whole thing. So I would just say, get honest, find those, like, look, you have to think about, like, what temperaments really trigger me. Like, somebody who has the same temperament as my mum, that's not gonna work. It's like, no, it's not gonna work. Like, what types of temperaments, are gonna help me to feel nourished and well? And that's difficult to do sometimes. And sometimes you need to spend time with people to, like, really, if they're not already family and not super known to you. So yeah, I would start at the basics and interrogate every single thing.
I'd also add that just because you like somebody doesn't mean you can live with them. Um, my best friend, when I told her about my plans to move in with Ivana, she was like, because she knows I used to be married to her friend. And so she knows that I was like, I'm never going to live with another human being again. She was like, what brought this on? And I was like, like she was one of the few people who, when they were at my house, I wasn't like, when are they going to leave? When is she going to leave?
Mm.
And I was like, I don't mind sharing my space because there are people who had stayed at my previous apartment because I had a guest room who I love dearly, but I was counting down the days till their flight. So just because you like somebody, that's not an automatic. This is a person I could live with and share my personal space with.
Absolutely. And then I suppose you could configure, like, what does the apartment look like? Like, if, like, we saw an apartment that we knew was going to be too small. Like, we couldn't all be in the kitchen together, and we all couldn't be in the living room together. And so it was just like, how would this even work? And spaciousness and space might actually be an issue. It might be a deal breaker. Might
We had
actually
a
be a deal
question
breaker.
about how much space do you need? Um, we knew that like the size of my apartment, my two-bedroom apartment, it was spacious. And so we did the math and we were like, okay, if we added another bedroom to this, we knew not to look at any places under 100 square meters. Don't ask me what that is in square feet, y'all, because I don't know. But I say this because in this city, it is notorious for, oh, it's a three-bedroom, two-bath, and it's 65 square meters. And I'm like, that's smaller than I cannot tell you how many three-bedrooms we saw under 80 square meters. So, yes, having some conversations about like, what are we looking for? What feels comfortable? What is going to make it feel like so we're not all up on each other?
And we also talked about it being Mexico City. And so we wanted an updated apartment because of the earthquake tremors and the earthquakes. We didn't want an old building. So that meant that there are certain neighborhoods we were never going to be looking in. We weren't going to be looking in Roma Norte and all those older places. And we said we wanted to be, not so high up, not anything above the sixth floor. Like, we had a whole list, and I was like, when we sent this out to real estate agents, I was like, they must have been like, who the hell do
Good
they
luck.
think they are? Yeah, they were like, who the hell do they think they are? But actually, we got more than we bargained for. We got much more than we bargained for. So it's possible. Dream, man. Just dream.
Okay.
Yeah. See what happens.
Another question we had was about the lease agreement with an exit clause. Our lease does not have that. We are
No.
both equally on the line for the rent. And so that did figure into we wanted to pick a place that in case one of us died, something happened, technically one person could pay the rent if they absolutely had to. Not that we want to, but if they absolutely had to.
Yeah, that's something that we didn't consider. I think in terms of like, worst case scenarios, we were like, we each need to know each other's family numbers, like next of kin, if anything happens, that type of stuff. And yeah, yeah, good thinking. We didn't even we didn't even think about that. No
Yeah,
exit
it
clause.
was. But no, you are right because when I moved to my daughter, my best friend, my cousin, I sent my new address and I was like, and here is my roommates, their Mexican phone number, their US phone number. I made sure she's got theirs because basically she's my emergency contact here in Mexico.
Absolutely. One of my housemates said, "Oh, if anything happens to me, there are certain things in my room that I need you to get rid of before my family comes." That was so funny. So we've got a list of all the things that need to be taken out. She was like, "Go into that
I
drawer and
love
take
that.
that out." And I was like,
I love that.
"Okay."
Okay. This is not a question, but I am curious, was this part of the conversations that y'all had about like who's because you have already said you're an extrovert, the two of them are introverts. Uh, are you all morning people? Are you all night owls?
Okay, I think the two introverts are probably morning people. I get up early, but I don't. I have a routine. I have a whole morning routine. So I'm not actually engaging in the household in the morning till at least afternoon, like at least after 12 noon. And that's the way that I've set up my life. Because I said, if I was going to leave my job, I am not a morning person. And obviously, when you go to work, you usually go in the mornings, right? And I was like, if I ever do this sabbatical and move abroad, I want my mornings to myself. I don't do anything after 12. I try not to do anything after 12 noon. And so I can hear my introverted housemates in the mornings talking, doing their stuff. And I'm doing my yoga, meditation, and I don't really, so it works okay. It kind of works okay. But I'm very clear, I'm not a morning person. And this sabbatical has allowed me to really curate the life that I want. Like literally.
Well, that's the whole point. Like,
I know.
that is the whole point. But I do also wanna say, because I think, uh, her statement is probably how several other people feel, this idea that, like, if I'm an early bird, I need to be with other early birds and vice versa, and I don't think that's the case. I am an early bird, she is not. And I think it works well because when I wake up at 6 AM, I basically have the whole apartment to myself to do what I need to. I just need to not be obnoxious and make a ridiculous amount of noise. Uh, and then, she hits her stride like at 10 PM. I am in the bed most of the time. And so I actually, it gets a little tricky when I need something around 9 AM because it's like she might technically be up, but she, like you said, not ready to engage.
No.
So but I think it actually can work really well,
Yeah.
when y'all are
Like
opposites that
yesterday,
way.
my housemate to me, yeah, like my housemate said to me yesterday, she bought a new coffee grinder, and she was like, if I try and grind my coffee in the morning, is that gonna like impact you? So you're having those conversations. She's a morning person, I'm not a morning person, so we kind of try and communicate. But I've never thought that that was a problem. That's a really interesting question. Yeah,
Yeah,
I've never
I
seen,
think
but it
people
could be
assume
maybe.
it will be a problem, but,
Hmm.
actually find it to be a benefit that we kind of work on opposite schedules, that sort of thing. Okay, so here's another question we have. Um, are there ground rules to follow? Um, do y'all have, like, house rules or anything like that?
Yeah, we do. We do have a few house rules. We talked about cleanliness. We've talked about like when people come over to visit, to come over for a coffee, maybe someone stays overnight or something. We have rules around that. but people can't be walking around with no clothes on. Like this just doesn't like just
Yeah.
basic things like that. But maybe I don't know if you would ordinarily be having those conversations, but we're like you if you have people over, they can't be walking around, in the
And
whatever.
is that how those rules were set up? Just y'all just had conversations about like, "Hey, what are we gonna
Yeah,
do about X, Y, and Z?"
yeah.
Okay.
No one, if someone is in a partnership, no one's partner can come and live here. Like like there's the three of us, so like people can stay over, but like your if you get a boyfriend or girlfriend, like no, that's this is not their home. This is
No,
not their, they need
that's a
to
good
go
one
and
to
find
have.
their home.
What about paying for living expenses? How do y'all handle that?
Okay, so in Mexico City, there's always one room that's massive. Like there's always one room that's huge. So whoever has that room pays more because there's more space. They have their own balcony. Their bathrooms are double the size. Their closets are double the size. The bedroom is probably triple the size. So we were able to. No, there was a bit of backwards and forwards, but we were saying, look, the people in the smaller rooms can't pay the same as the person with their own balcony. It doesn't like you. It just can't work like that. So we were able to, in terms of rent, be able to divvy that up to a point where everyone thought it was fair. And in terms of other expenses like gas, electric, it's split three ways.
That was something I was concerned about because most of the places we saw, there is that one big room and then the other ones weren't, except in this apartment. The
Oh.
2 the 2 bedrooms that have bathrooms are almost the exact same size. It is obvious that one room is intended to be a master because, the cabinet where the sink is, like, a little bigger, but
Mhm.
the bathrooms are virtually all the same size. Um, the closets, the 2 one is I don't know the word in English. In Spanish, a vestidor, where you, like, walk through the closet to get to the bathroom. But in the other room, it's a massive walk-in closet that is actually bigger than some bedrooms I've seen in this city. So, we got lucky. The 2 rooms are really on par with each other. And then the room that
Mhm.
we use for an office is a little smaller, but it's still sizable enough that we could fit both desks in there and have a place to film and do all of that. Um, so
Yeah.
now with your rules, are they formal? Did y'all sign? Y'all got like a process to put somebody out? Because we ain't do none of that.
No, the ground rules, I think, are probably etched in our brains because we know the consequences of some of this stuff. It's the small things that can break down this arrangement. And so we try to keep, people accountable to. You remember what we said? We said we weren't going to do that, or we said that we were going to do this. It's not written, it's not signed. It's difficult to kick someone out when you're on the lease. It's harder when it's amongst you and like the landlord is not initiating any kind of eviction. I think it would be really tricky to do that. So all the pre-preparation is really important, but just know that sometimes it just doesn't work. Sometimes you're
Yeah.
just taking a huge risk and sometimes it won't work. And so I suppose that's another conversation. What then happens if you think that it doesn't work? Does that mean that the person who doesn't want to stay then has the right to sublet or to get someone in to cover their name on the lease or whatever? Maybe those are really good conversations to have because it is a risk. It is.
Now, we have a question about subletting. For us, our situation, this wasn't I kind of feel like this is a non-issue because we're not interested in that. But one of the advantages to me now splitting rent with someone else is if I eventually go the route that I'm thinking I might and get residency somewhere else, the idea of having to pay rent in 2 places at one time was not attractive to me at all. But if I'm
Mhm.
only paying half the rent in one place and maybe half or a third of the rent in some other place, all of a sudden that becomes a whole lot more doable for me, somebody who retired on a teacher's salary. Um, Now, in y'all situation, are y'all allowing subletting? Like, you mentioned that you are a slow traveler.
All of us are, all three of us are. And so that we recognize, and it's something that we talked about, that there are periods where we're going to be away. Like I'm about to leave to go to Bali and then to go to Australia. So like I'm going to be away for a long while. And so even before we found this place, we talked like what could that look like? The owner is agreeable to subletting, so that has to be in the lease agreement. And without even asking, he already put it on the in the lease agreement. So that's kind of fine. And I think, like I said in the beginning, the owner was just like, we got these women of a certain age, they're going to take care of my place. So they know, we're not going to find this 15, 20-year-old to come and take over a sublet. We're more likely to find somebody who's very similar to us. And so I think he's just like, okay, in some ways, like I trust you and you're responsible anyway, regardless.
Yeah.
Because and so we are able to sublet. So that's something to think about, to talk to an owner to say, it's a risk. It's a risky conversation.
Yeah, because no, my previous apartment, I was not allowed to sublet. I was not allowed to do Airbnb. I was not allowed to do any of that. The lease for this place, this was the most minimalist lease I have ever seen in this city. So who
Mm.
knows? But I don't think it's something that either of us are interested in at the moment. Now, here's a follow-up question about how does the process of subletting work? Would the remaining roommates vet the incoming co-liver?
So this is interesting because this is what's happened this week. As I said, I'm going to Bali and I'm going to Australia. And so I'm going to be away for quite a while. So I identified someone who is taking a sabbatical, who is wanting to do a career change, and is interested in co-living. And so, obviously I speak to her. My flatmates ask me some pertinent questions to ask her to do that. She then comes to view the place and then sits down with the two other housemates. I look, it would be terrible for me to, if they said to me, look, I just don't like this person's energy, or this person frightens me, or I don't believe this person. I'm not sure that this is the right person. It would be, I don't think I would necessarily feel comfortable being able to enjoy myself in Bali and Australia, knowing that they've raised issues with me that like are valid. So yeah, they do play a part. They don't make the final decision because I'm still responsible in the sublease, but I definitely want them to vet that person so that they feel comfortable living, sharing a space with someone else. And that's a tricky one. I was lucky. I was absolutely lucky. I mean, I don't know what it is about Mexico City. I don't know if it's in the water. I don't know. But I was absolutely lucky in finding someone who, you know, was a really great fit, and they had things in common where they've lived and what they do. And I was like watching them all talking, having this betting conversation. And I was like, wow, this is incredible. Fingers crossed that it does work. But yeah, so they do get a say. And I think they should have a say. They're sharing the space with that person. They should have a say.
Yeah, I think that it's it's a shift. I think for those of us from the United States, it's a shift, but I don't think it's an impossible thing. I don't think it's a thing that we can't do. It's just we have to change because we've been told our entire lives, like, you got to take care of yourself. You need to be independent. You need to do all these things. You can be those things, but you can also be a part of a community. And in being part of that, you know, there are the responsibilities you have in being a good community member, which is like for you, not to just say, y'all, this is who's going to be taking my room for the next 6 months. Deuces. Like, you have to play your role just as well, just as well. Um,
Absolutely.
there was I think we kind of touched on this about like um overnight guests, and because they may or may not be male guests, uh, but
Yeah,
that y'all have had those conversations about what your expectations are, what the guidelines are. Um, and I think again, that's
absolutely.
important if you are considering this kind of living, like you don't, and you know that you might like somebody to sleep over every now and then. You would not co-live with somebody who is adamant about no,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. Yeah, we looked at the scenario and we were like, look, let's not pretend that we're nuns and let's not pretend that we've just jumped from heaven. You know, we're women and we do all the things. So it's like to not have that conversation is a mistake. And like also equally, like I'm an extrovert and my two housemates are introverts, and I love to have dinner parties. I love to do conversational dinner parties, like where I bring people together who would not normally be, and it's like having those conversations like up front saying, I love having dinner parties. I love cooking for people and people coming over and lots of chatting and things like that. And like, well, how does that work? Last week I had one. I had a conversational dinner. It was like I call it a community dinner. And my housemates were like, we're introverts. I don't know what you want. Like, I
Like,
can't think of anything worse than sitting at a dinner table having to talk. I can't think of anything worse. And so I was like, oh, I don't know how this is going to work. And I was like, I feel really bad that, like, that it's not a space that you would feel comfortable in, but I totally get it. But also, I need to do my thing where as an
but as
extrovert.
an introvert, the idea that, yeah, I can just go in my room. Like,
Yeah,
y'all go do that out there, I will be in my room. Just let me know
yeah.
what time.
Yeah, and when people came in, they were hugging, saying, "Hi, hi, hi," and then they just went to their rooms, watched, did whatever, took their sleeves of cookies and did whatever, popcorn, and they were like, "I'm cool with that. I don't have to sit there because you've asked me to." And then again, I get to feed my extrovert self in my home, which I love to do. But these are conversations that we had prior. So it's no surprise
Yeah.
to them that I wanna have dinner parties. There's no surprise. And really,
Yeah.
there's no surprise to me that they don't wanna come.
I think that is if you're watching this, whether you're watching this live or you are watching from the future and watching the replay, I think the important thing we have all heard over and over again tonight that if you're going to do this, it's about communication. It's about being honest about who you are, where you are, what you want, what you need, and having open communication with the people that are going to be in community with you.
And if people don't want to go on that journey about talking about deal breakers and talking about temperament and communication and what's off limits and what's in, that's not the person to live with. If
Exactly.
you can't have those conversations, they are the least people that you need to be, like, sharing your space with.
Exactly. Um, Thank you, Angela,
You
for
are
coming to
welcome.
talk to us tonight. Thank you guys that are here live in the chat for hanging out despite the technical difficulties. Um, Now, Angela has a YouTube channel. You see it next to her name, How to Glow Up Your Life. Tell us a little bit about your channel.
So I've actually just started my YouTube channel. I'm on Instagram, and that's glow underscore up my life, and um, I'm an emotional well-being coach. So it is about all the things that interest me around emotional well-being and things that like some of my clients kind of raise with me around some of the things that they're kind of grappling with. And obviously, I preserve their confidentiality, but I think if it's a theme for some people, it might be a wider theme. So I've actually just started my YouTube channel because I said that was my goal for 2024 was to set up my YouTube channel and stop chatting about it and just do it. And so yeah, I talk about all things emotional well-being. I'm very much about like our level of emotional literacy and our emotional landscape is so important, because I think that that's our future, how we navigate these things, how we communicate, like, but there are some things in our lives that we just have no control over. The incidents that we've been in, the experiences that we've been in, the families that we happen to be born into, the relationships that we happen to have had, that sometimes have a lot of impact on us. And I really feel that when we can begin to, with awareness, unpick some of that stuff, just enriches our lives. And it means that we can do this stuff of like giant building. Like, I think we're just giants what we're doing in terms of Black women, in terms of like this sabbatical movement and moving abroad and reimagining our lives and beginning to dream again. I think it's something that's done better when your emotional landscape is clear. It's much more enriching. But you have to fight for your emotional well-being nowadays. You have to, because as
Yes,
Black
you
women,
do.
we that, like, someone's going to tell you, who do you think you are? What's your place in the world? Like, why are you here? Why are you in Mexico? Like, why what are you doing? What do you mean you're not working? What do you mean you've retired at whatever age, 40, 50? Like, all of that stuff. We sometimes feel that we have to fight or preserve, like, our emotional well-being. And I just think it's the future. And I want Black women to not just to survive in the grind culture, but I want us to just be able to thrive and be nourished by being a human being. And I think our
Oh, yeah.
emotional well-being is so, so important. And not many people tell us about emotions and how do we manage our emotions. Who taught you about how to manage your emotions, unless you went to therapy? Like, my
I was gonna
family,
say, I'm Gen X. There were no adults around teaching me anything.
latchkey
So,
kids, right? Latchkey kids.
we were just out there feral with our latch keys, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, you just had like a necklace with a key on it underneath your shirt. That was it.
There
So
was nobody.
there was nobody. And actually, I think in terms of like, I'll just say this little bit, is that I think probably for our generation, some of us may be missing the impact of elders who may have passed down some things to us. And I think the emotional way of being, about how do you regulate your emotions? How do you depersonalize what's yours and what someone else's? How do you not be a people pleaser so that in the workplace you don't burn out? There's research to say you've got an anxious attachment style, it's a highway to burnout. How Who tells us these things? Where do we get that information from? And I suppose that's what I'm here for. I want to help people to understand that, because I just know that there's richness in there. It's all liberation, right? We move
Yep.
location, we region, but there's an internal liberation that needs to happen, which is difficult. And like, we're all about collectivism here. We're talking about co-living. You don't have to do it by yourself.
Exactly, exactly. Okay, y'all. So her channel is How to Glow Up My Life. That is here on YouTube. If you want to follow Angela on Instagram, it is glow underscore up
Underscore.
my life.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
will link to her YouTube channel in the description. Again, thank you all for hanging in with us tonight, despite my technical difficulties, which I still have no idea why that was going on. And I was like, when am I going to talk to y'all next? What else do I have going on? I'll be on a flight Sunday. So next week's live should be interesting if my grandchildren allow me to go live. We'll see. We'll see. But until then, y'all, bye.